Hello, everyone. We are at the studio of CKO Digital, based in the great city of Houston, and we are Untitled Final, a bunch of designers talking about design things. Today, we will be going over design school and the different aspects of what we each went through. So, pretty much going over just a wide array of topics when it comes to design school, what we each kind of experienced, what the differences were, and what we maybe wanted to kind of change post school now. So, I guess kind of diving right into things, like what it might help if we kind of explain a little bit of our backgrounds. So Luis and I, we went to University of Houston. We got our bachelor's degree in graphic design, as opposed to Jimmy here. He also went to University of Houston, but you got a digital media degree, right? But you kind of like specialized.
I'm a digital media major, but I specialize in packaging.
Okay, so it was, from my understanding, it's like more design centric and like branding more so than like marketing, right?
They try to push marketing, but I feel like they don't really know what they want to be. It's a relatively new major, honestly.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, I think that's the kind of impression that we kind of had as well whenever we initially kind of talked to you or like past people that have come to us for like interviews, like even like Hasana back in the day. Like it was hard to kind of pinpoint what y'all kind of like went through and kind of like were taught just by like having conversations about it. It seemed like it was a lot more like kind of open-ended what y'all went through versus like Luis and I, we were like very specialized in terms of like
maybe we can go over a little bit about our experience, because I know we've had several coworkers that come from different backgrounds, some of them from Oklahoma, some of them from U of H, but different programs. And we've met from our experiences for other schools like in AIGA or meetings and things like that. People have gone to different schools. They've also shared their experiences with us, and kind of like we can go over what our experiences was.
Yeah. So like for us, like we were hyper specialized in graphic design. It was a lot more like the technical aspects of graphic design, like really doing a deep dive into the different programs, making sure that we understood like at least the fundamentals of like the major programs, like through Adobe Creative Suite, so that we pretty much leave understanding how to use each one, and we're flexible enough to kind of fill in creatively like what we need to kind of create for different sets of clients, whether that's full out branding or print collateral or even web and video. Even photography, we kind of did a little dip into that as well. But I think something that I kind of like post education kind of realized is that we were a lot more like concept driven. That was something that was pushed a lot more in our field, or I mean in our education with our degree. It wasn't very much about like the marketing of things or like how the target audience is really kind of affected by what we're trying to kind of put out. Like it was touched on briefly, but it wasn't emphasized. But I think like something also acknowledges like I guess like the student or like the teacher's goals was for us to leave with like a great portfolio, which I think like they accomplished that as their goal, like for us. Because I think we do leave, like Luis and I, we left with like great portfolios. There's a wide variety of stuff in there. All our projects look very different. It was very kind of spread out, even in terms of medium. We had like video stuff to show, packaging, full up branding concepts that kind of were applied to a bunch of different kind of assets. I think there are certain things that kind of lacked. So I was kind of wondering, like, what do you kind of see that you kind of left your degree with? Like, what was like your kind of takeaway from what you went through?
Well, I know for the digital media program, and this is just from my point of view, I don't know about all the other students because they all seem to have like their own perspective on the digital media program. So what I know is that the design isn't really there.
Really?
Actually, so you're going to have to actually self-teach yourself. And I think on the first 2 years, they teach you just like InDesign, Photoshop, basically the whole Adobe suite. Stuff like Dreamweaver. They taught us Muse until that like went away. Yeah, you know. And then the junior and senior year, they try to make us go into more of our emphasized areas, but at the same time, they still want us to be a jack of all trades. So they still expect us to know all the other facets of digital media, which is basically a really big umbrella term. So I would like to say that they actually teach you a good amount of skills, but you're kind of a beginner in everything.
Mm.
So, and on top of that, they don't teach you design fundamentals or concepts. So when you come out of when you graduate, you're kind of just left with like not a good portfolio, very minimal information. So it's very much like dependent on your freelance work and stuff you had to like do post education.
Gotcha. So it was kind of like a lot of surface level type stuff. Whereas like us, it was like a deep dive, but it's like one thing. But there's like post education, we've come to realize that like there's
we lack a lot of stuff that we lack. A lot of things that, because you and previous coworker of ours, Hosanna, she also went to that program. You guys were knowledgeable of many things, right? And there was times where we were like, okay, we don't know how to do this. Like, let's ask you guys. And you were like, oh yeah, we touched a little bit up on it, and then we can kind of grow up on that. But it definitely, I think it's an advantage to kind of know a lot of things. Because us, that we were super hyper specialized, like backtracking, like our program, like we were given several classes to choose from. We had to take 21 credits of those classes before we were into block. So a lot of those classes were printmaking. What else?
Like silkscreen. There's type classes.
Silkscreen type classes.
Like digital media.
Digital media. A lot of different classes that, depending on your personality and your kind of what you wanted to do, you can incorporate a lot of those classes. But there were requirements that you needed to take, like
there's like fundamentals, principle.
Yeah, there was a lot of those that you needed to take, a lot of design driven courses that you needed to take. And there was a lot of them that were elective. So once we were accepted into block, which is the design program that we went to, you had to be accepted. You had to show all the work that you did throughout those 21 credits. And they were like, okay, you're essentially good enough or you're not good enough.
Yeah. So it was a pretty brutal process, honestly. Because like each year, only I think there's like 24, 25 students are selected to kind of move on to block.
It was like 10 or 12.
Yeah. And like on any given block review is what it was called, or like essentially just a portfolio review, like 30 plus people would go up, and only about maybe 30% would actually make it through and like be pushed on to like the rest, essentially 2 years of your life.
Right.
So it was pretty like cutthroat. And I mean, we like in hindsight, you understand like why, but mostly it just kind of came down to, I feel like, just like resources that are available to that program at U of H. Like if they had more teachers, they could essentially accept more people and whatnot. But
yeah, because every year the number of entries have been going up and up. Like I haven't kept up, but I know the previous year there was like 40 in one time or something like that. And they could only accept like 10 because of the number of staff that they had.
So hopefully it does kind of like grow over time, because it does need to, because I think I guess before kind of getting too much into it, like did y'all kind of do something similar? Was there like some kind of review process for y'all to kind of continue, or was it just like you were your own kind of person and you just take what you wanted to complete your degree, and there was like no kind of barrier of entry at certain points?
There's no barrier at all.
Really?
There's no review. You could essentially just stay in digital media as long as you want. And honestly, their standard is pretty low, but at the same time, it's relatively new, and they're still trying to like figure stuff out. Because I know starting this semester, they just started to have a UX UI course, which is like right after I graduate and leave. So
like,
a bummer.
Yeah, wish this was around when I was around.
Yeah. But originally, the digital media degree in University of Houston was actually a print emphasized major. But since the whole people like, print is dead type thing, which is of course false.
There's a lot of print still goes into it.
With that misconception, they wanted to like, we need to incorporate more digital aspects into it, because that's honestly where the future is going. But yeah, it's still relatively new. It'll be nice if, I know it's going to improve over time, but it's just unfortunate that people like me and Hosanna were in that time where they're still trying to figure stuff out.
Right. Yeah, I think there's I mean, that's kind of like one of the things that we wanted to bring was like just the pros and cons that we each went through. Cause like Luis and I might be making our experience kind of like, it was a great experience, which it was, but it was like, there are definitely kind of like shortcomings to what we went through. And we pretty much experienced immediately once we left. Cause like, for example, like what we kind of left not knowing, was very much about like the business side of things, marketing, what we're worth, what our work is worth. There is essentially we didn't know what we didn't know. Like that's what it kind of came down to. It was like, maybe the teachers was expecting, okay, they're going to have to figure that stuff out for the rest of their lives anyways. Let's just make sure that they come out with great work. And then it's kind of off to the races with them individually. But
there isn't enough time, like from their perspective, there isn't enough time to kind of go through all of that. It's like another 2 years. So it'd be like a 4-year degree. You have a business plus design.
But I think, from what I understand, like y'all kind of touched on a little bit on business sort of, as well as marketing.
Yeah. In a few courses, they taught us how to like hypothetically run and budget for a business if you want to start one. Freelancing fundamentals. They teach us stuff about package design requirements for certain companies, such as like cosmetics, food, stuff you have to have on the packaging, plus keeping in mind that you have to design in a way that fits for supply chain and mass production. So that is a good skill that we definitely learned. It's very boring, of course, but
yeah, but I mean, it's you run across it regardless at some point in your life. So it's like that's the thing. Like with us, like we left like not covering that kind of stuff. Like for us, I feel like we were just like the possibilities were endless, and we could do anything we wanted to. But it's like once you actually step out into like the real world, there's requirements, like you're saying. There's things you have to put onto packaging. There's, I don't know.
A lot of our projects were imaginary. Like they were like make-believe companies or like make-believe ideas that were never meant to kind of be created. So that kind of led us to kind of dive deep into concepts, not thinking about budget, not thinking about experience, not thinking about any of that, but the concept and how good you can tie your idea to your execution. So that was the main emphasis.
And do you think, like in hindsight, do you think that was good or bad, or like probably?
I mean, it has its pros. Yeah, it has pros and cons because concept development is really hard, and I think that's very important. And budgeting and stuff like that, I mean, you learn throughout time. The concept and kind of nailing the concept is really primary, I think.
Yeah, it's getting the idea down for sure. Yeah, I think I kind of feel about the same way. Like it was, I think we left with, like I said, like earlier, like a great portfolio. And I think that was the main point of it, which it definitely succeeded in. But yeah, like I think what was for me, like what was the biggest frustrating part is that like immediately leaving and then us giving the responsibility here at CK was like, okay, we need to figure out the design business of it all, or like the design or the business side of graphic design and branding. It's like no one's teaching us. So it was just completely trial by fire and going through trial and error process for a couple of years now. So it's like, it would have been nice to at least like touch on like, this is a proposal. This is a contract. This is, you need to do initial meetings. You have to like talk about strategy. Like strategy is something that we never talked really about.
It's cool. Yeah, maybe we kind of went over it whenever we were doing a couple projects about how a user would experience your product and how kind of like touching into their personas, but it wasn't really in depth in terms of concept and experience and all that. It was none of that. Yeah,
because like even today, like I just got an interview with someone that we're hopefully going to maybe hire as like someone dedicates like marketing for us, who's essentially just be running our social media, coming with marketing campaigns and so on. And what's interesting is that he came from the same degree as you, Jimmy, or the same kind of field. And based on the work that he was showing a lot more kind of like almost like a brand guideline already built out, but it went into like the numbers side of things. And like they did a deep dive into like personas and essentially what we do now with like strategy, like he already had that. Like that was already his way of thinking of like, who are we targeting? What are their pain points? Like what's their demographic? And then using that as like the main driver to kind of solve this branding problem or marketing problem, whatever. Whereas like it was with us, it was like there was a project where we touched on it, but it wasn't like super emphasized that we were consistent with every single project.
Right.
It wasn't like just honed in. I feel like that if we understood that, I feel like it could have
Right.
helped us a lot more in the long run.
Another thing I want to kind of talk about was the same thing, but the school can't kind of teach everyone the way that they are going to go. Like, we didn't know we were going to end up here. What if we would have ended up in in-house studio or
Right.
somewhere else? Like, each job has its own kind of dilemmas to deal with. So in in-house, you had to deal with people
like
telling you what to
budgets.
do, budgets, stuff like that. And so just each scenario is kind of different from each other, and it'd be hard to kind of fill in those shoes. Like, nobody was going to be like, oh, you're now graduated, go be a creative director and account manager and project manager and designer and web designer all in one. Like, we kind of have to go through that experience and just teach ourselves as well. But it would be nice to kind of have an education where it would touch upon multiple things. And we can talk about that and how maybe you can achieve that if you were self-taught and you kind of had a curriculum to kind of go off on your own. Be okay, I need to learn design concepts. I need to learn all of the Adobe suite. I need to learn business. I need to learn. And there is things out there right now. But it's like you don't know what you don't know. It's like, how would you know that you need that?
Right.
Because when I first started doing design or graphic design, I didn't even know what that was.
Right, exactly.
Like, what do you mean typography? What do you mean layout? Like, I'm just a wannabe artist that likes to do things.
But you also want to like make a living.
Right. I can't just paint and do whatever. Like, I have to.
I feel like we're like designers always kind of start off as like a like practical artist. It's like yes, I like making art, I like being creative, but I have a bill to pay, I have a car to pay for, I have rent, so it's like I can't. It's hard. Like it's a daunting task to try and think. It's like I need to make it as an artist. So it's like, what are the other routes? And somehow you end up in graphic design. Fortunately, or we did at least. Fortunately,
because it sounds complicated, and I didn't know what it meant. So I knew that what I did know wasn't going to make me money. And this stuff that sounded complicated about symbols and communication, whatever, like
drawing and colors. It's like at least it's visual.
Yeah, it's still under the art kind of degree. So I'm just going to do it. That was my mindset.
Honestly, that's what it was for me too. It was like I drove up to U of H and I was like, I like to draw. I like to be creative. Here I have a portfolio of stuff. Like, what makes sense here? And then somehow kind of like end up in graphic design, which is good. Yeah. But I don't know what was kind of your.
Well, I actually wanted to be a photographer. Like, I was gonna be like, I'm gonna be the best photographer ever when I went to high school. After high school. And then I immediately found out, I was like, dang, I'm really bad at photography. Then I bounced back off of wanting to be an illustrator, possibly a fashion designer. And I was like, those are really hard also. And then I by the time I transferred, which was 2 years in of college, I was like, I'm gonna do graphic design. And I was really interested in it at the time. And I really wanted to be in it. But I know for Block, you guys had to have a portfolio and stuff like that. And I didn't have a portfolio at all. So I kind of just went to the second best thing, which is digital media.
Wait, so did you know about the graphic design program?
Yeah, I already knew about it.
Interesting.
Yeah. But then I heard of digital media, which is, I was assuming that they taught relatively the same stuff. And it kind of was, plus marketing. So I kind of just went with that. And at that time, I kind of like always envied the graphic design major because like I was assuming they're like, oh, everyone who comes out there is like super great at design, and digital media, they don't really have a lot of good designers. So I always envy that.
It's not true, by the way.
I see that now, but
I mean, we're all right designers, but it's
also based on kind of your own push and your own kind of drive.
Yeah. And at that moment, I kind of figured it out when I graduated. And I was like, it's not that bad. I could just stay in digital media.
Yeah.
I think that's a great option too, because at one point when I was going off for block, I was like, well, what if I don't make it? Like, what's my fallback? And a lot of the people there in art school that didn't make it before I went were saying, oh, I'm just going to do a general arts degree. That would have been, I don't know what would have happened, but I just felt like that wouldn't have been right for me to do. Like, I would think that wasn't what I want to do. It's just general art. What was I going to be, like an art teacher? Like, right. So I think knowing that there's multiple kind of degrees out there, like digital media, and then also digital media emphasized in like packaging, or I don't know what else they have.
They have print, packaging, e-commerce, and motion media, which is basically videography, photography.
Right. Like I would love to go there.
But it's like you don't know, and that's something that's frustrating about UVH. So it's like, in hindsight, now that we're kind of thinking about it and talking about it, it's like there is such a lack of like communication between departments that it's like, we as students, we all went to the same school, yet we had no idea that there were these other similar options that were even available. So it's like, it kind of built up, like for us, it kind of built up this design program that we went through on block as like this do or die situation, where it honestly, it really wasn't. And I think by any off chance that any of like U of H students that are in either of our degrees are listening to this thing, like, go into block if you're going into it like with the mindset of like it may or may not work out, but you could still do what you want to do in life regardless if you get into this one thing, It's not a do or die situation. I
mean, hypothetically, if you do get rejected from block, are you still allowed to reapply like this following year after?
So you get 2 chances.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first time you go up, if you get rejected, you pretty much like talk to like a teacher. I didn't get accepted my first time around. So I pretty much like reached out to the teachers that pretty much critique you and your portfolio. And then you just ask them, okay, what do I need to work on? And then it's pretty much like up to that person to be like, okay, this is what I need to kind of emphasize for my next go around. And then, if once you go up your second time, it's you either make it or you don't. If you don't make it, then the program doesn't allow you to apply again. But from what I understand and like having conversations like with people that I know and very close to, they pretty much like help. They're supposed to kind of help. The teacher's supposed to kind of help guide you into like what your other options are. And from my understanding now, I don't know how it was like kind of when we were going. I feel like it was a little bit more do or die back then, but now they kind of have like still ongoing graphic design classes that you could take afterwards if you don't make it. And essentially you kind of like, it's described as you get a general arts degree, but a specialization in graphic design. So it's kind of like your situation where it's like, you have a digital media degree, but a specialization in packaging and collateral or something. So it's essentially the same kind of thing now that's happening there, which is good.
It wasn't happening before.
Right. That's, it didn't seem like it was, because like there were like some conversations back then that people didn't make it both times. And like, like their honest feedback from like teachers or something is like, you should look into communication or something. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, does that mean I have to like hit the reset button on my education? Like that's a lot of money. That's super disheartening. Like, but now I think they've kind of figured out a better way to approach students that don't make it. Cause it has been frustrating in the past, and I'm glad that like, I think they're kind of getting on a better track, but I do want them to kind of have better communication and having like these other options or these other opportunities within like just different schools. It's like, because it's mind blowing that we're paying so much to be there. And
there should be a network of like ways of getting your degree. It shouldn't be just one way. Because we have a lot of different experiences. Like we like to do a lot of different things. And our program is emphasized on everyone gets kind of the same project and everybody gets the same result at the end. But like, say you didn't make it, it'd be nice to kind of know, okay, there's different ways. Like it's not, because a lot of people didn't even go up because of that pressure. They're like, oh no, I'm not going to do block.
Or even like the second time, like if they got denied the first time, there's like completely like, all right. Or it's like a money thing. It's like, I don't have the money to do another year or another semester of improving my portfolio again, to go up again, to then commit to 2 years, so there's,
because sometimes you have to retake a couple classes. Like I took intermediate design or something like that twice, because the first time around I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. It was like my first time around, and second time around I took it. I felt a lot more comfortable with it, but definitely like at that point, like it shouldn't be this way. Like you shouldn't be, oh, whatever, I'll just add it to my to my loan or whatever. Like it shouldn't be that way. Like you should seriously think about what you're spending and how much you're spending, because that it takes a while for you to pay off that stuff. So definitely kind of have a plan would have been great. Like I didn't take any classes extra. Like everything I took was precise and everything, but I did take a couple things twice, and one of them was like counted as an elective rather than a core class. But it nothing went to waste. But I could imagine having somebody going up again and taking more than what they should just because they want to get into block. And it's just I
think that kind of like goes into the current kind of like college system that's kind of out there, and like what we kind of deal with, and like how I guess the internet's kind of changed that. I think there's still like definitely pros and cons to like the college university system versus like what's now available, which is honestly just fucking YouTube. Right. And then like just being self-taught. Like now there's both options are super viable, and like what are y'all's thoughts on like which route do you think is good or bad, or like what are the pros and cons for each of them? Like would you have done the same thing, like go through like a school system, or both of y'all pretty much, or would y'all have like tried to do like a self-taught if y'all were like 5 years younger and just about to get into like your, I guess like college education or like higher education?
Well, I basically know all my design knowledge from self-teaching myself because digital media didn't provide that for me. And I guess that's a pro in itself, because since it was relatively new, all the students immediately knew that they have to get their shit together. But for the most part, if it was up to me, I would still probably take it regardless, because no matter how much I like talk so badly of my major, I know for a fact that I learned a lot of stuff from it. And I honestly probably wouldn't be able to get my job here if I didn't have those skills,
Yeah, I think it's a really hard kind of hypothetical question, because just the whole environment of college, there's a heaviness to it that it's like, oh, if you don't get a degree, it's kind of hard for you to find a job. Right. So there's that whole aspect of the value in having a degree rather than being self-taught. But then there's this other kind of face to it where it's like, you don't really need a degree to, like, if somebody comes in here and we hire them based off their portfolio, it doesn't really matter their degree. Like, their portfolio really speaks for who they are and kind of the skills that they have and their personality and their confidence and all of that. It's like, is it really worth 20, 30, 40 grand to kind of go through that?
Yeah. I think it really kind of depends on like the person, like what's your personality? Right. Like if you have such a drive and such a motivation to do it yourself, then yeah, like going the self-taught route like, can make sense for some people. But like, I think it kind of goes back to like, you knew yourself, like you knew like what would be best for you, and like for you it was going through school. And I think honestly for me it's the same. Like I kind of need that external pressure to
I wouldn't have put myself through the stuff that I went through on my own. I wouldn't have been like, okay, I'm gonna stay up 3 days and work on this self-taught project because I'm gonna prove to myself that I can do it. Like that would have never happened.
I'm gonna hand cut 70 pieces of paper early and perfect bind them. Like, if there wasn't an actual reason, I would not have done that on my own.
Right. So it's like, you need that discipline. You need that structure to kind of go through. And there's a lot of like systems out there like that, like the army or like things like that it's like, you need to go through that boot camp in order for you to be better. But no one's going to just go through boot camp on their own. Right. I know there is a lot of like individuals that are self-taught, but there's like very few. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So I think it just really kind of comes down to like just knowing yourself as a person. Like what do you need to kind of get to where you want to be? Like if you could really put yourself through shit and get the job done and end up with a great portfolio just by you teaching yourself and looking at YouTube videos or whatever it is, or Skillshare or Linda, whatever kind of resources are out there, then that's great,
Yeah, because I mean, when I'm going through YouTube, there's a lot of kids like young, 13, 14, up to like 20. They're like, oh, I was a self-taught designer like in England or in Australia or somewhere. And it's like, wow, they're really good. But they have like thousands of followers and they've just been straight at it, going at it for a good while. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, but that's like a very, very rare to see. But it is possible.
Yeah. I think something else that kind of differentiates, I guess, like for both of them, like going self-taught route or going through school, I feel like with going through school, not only are you buying like your education, but you're also buying into like a network of people. So you're buying into the network, the professional network that people start to build up over time, or like this school system starts to build up, or this degree or this program starts to build up just by having alumni go out into the world to find jobs. And then those alumni essentially like reaching out to like their past school teachers first and be like, hey, there's a job opening up at the place I'm working at. Do you all have any interns or like juniors or seniors kind of wanting to take a stab at this? That's definitely like a pro that I think people could also start considering. I'm not sure if people like think of it like that, but that's something to definitely kind of keep in mind. Cause like on the other hand, when it comes to being like self-taught, it's like you're your own network. Like you have to kind of be out there on your own and do that yourself. You're not buying into a bunch of relationships at the end of this, which I mean, I imagine is incredibly difficult. But on the other side of it, it's like if you're self-taught, that means that you're actively kind of working already. So it's like you're already building some level of professional networking on your own for 3-4 years, while that the school student is just grinding out stuff and will eventually get into a network. So it's like on both ways, you're kind of eventually getting into a network, but like one's buying into it and the other one's kind of like through your own personal agency kind of.
Yeah, for sure. And it may take longer than usual, depending on the person.
Right.
Regardless of whatever route they take.
Yeah, I think that kind of also just like the timing of it all, like how long it could kind of take to kind of get there. I kind of feel that like us here at CKO, like we've kind of felt that in terms of like building out the business side of all this. It's like, I feel like what we went through was a much longer process just because we didn't know what we're doing, you know? And it's kind of just been like a trial and error situation for a couple of years now. Whereas like if you went and worked for like a big old firm that already had like this structure in place and they had their shit figured out already, it's like it's a lot easier to kind of like, it's like, oh, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you run a design business. But that's not an agency, obviously. But it's like, it's essentially kind of like through school. It's like someone's showing you, someone's teaching you, you're kind of picking up as you're doing it. Whereas here, it's like we're doing it ourselves, which I mean, it has been fun. I mean, we've learned an incredible amount here, which is invaluable. But yeah, there's definitely like that kind of like time delay. It's like it took us longer to kind of get where we're at just because there wasn't that person above us like, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to land jobs. This is how you're supposed to approach clients or whatever, you know? So yeah. Let's see. I guess things like YouTube, how they change the game. I guess that's something that we kind of already touched on a little bit.
Yeah.
On how.
But I think I'm still learning off of YouTube.
That's true.
Like there's so many things that I still can't touch on. Like there's still so many. That's why design is so great, because there's just so many things you can do. Like you can do animation, you can do illustration, you can do branding, you can do, I mean, anything. So that's why it's just so critical to just always be learning, especially now that there's a lot of free content out on YouTube and things like Skillshare and Lynda. And I think those are really great. And just, you should never like stop learning.
Yeah, I think as designers, that's going to be like crucial for us, is to kind of always be adapting and learning, because like obviously new programs or new like social media platforms, like we always have to be kind of like adept to like just picking up and run with it, regardless of our own personal feelings about something. It's like, oh, I don't want to touch that program because I just don't like it. You know, it's like at some point we kind of have to like own up and be like, I have to learn this because it's the new standard. Which is cool though. I mean, that pushes us to kind of just continue growing, which, yeah, I agree with you. Like it's one of the good things about design, or one of the best things, honestly, is that there's always like so much more to keep on kind of learning and pushing. What are your thoughts on YouTube? How it affects your life, Jimmy?
Well, I go on it every day, so.
Oh my God. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, so, obviously I am the product.
The product with YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. I use it every day. I learn every day. It's
Yeah.
nice.
That's good. And it's cool seeing that that's like I mean, we kind of touched this a little bit on the last podcast where we talking about just like how social media is just like a great leveling field. And like YouTube is a huge example of that, where it's like, this is essentially free education if you just follow the right people almost and watch the tutorials enough, or like be hungry enough to kind of look for these. Like you could pretty much learn whatever the hell you want for the cost of your internet bill.
Right. And your attention, which is what everybody wants.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, it's not like we're trying to be like YouTube famous, but I think like it has a very practical kind of set of skills that you could kind of apply and just grow as a person. So shout out to YouTube for doing what they do.
Yeah. This is not sponsored, by the way.
That'd be cool. But I guess back to kind of the education of things, like post-education, what have we kind of picked up on? Like, I guess like each of us, what have we kind of picked up on outside of our education now that we're out in the real world? Whether that be like super business stuff or like marketing stuff or like technical stuff. Like, what are y'all's thoughts on the, like, would y'all like immediately kind of start being like, oh fuck, I don't know anything about this, I need to catch up almost?
Well, for me, when I graduated or finished, I was actually kind of comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it took a while to like get a job after a numerous amount of rejects. but that's a given for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew a lot of information enough to be like, I could basically fit anywhere now. The only thing I did have a worry about was wondering if my design was on par with what people are doing now. But that was when I was like very insecure at the time about my design education. But for the most part, with the skills I learned after, I could just basically take anything at that point.
Yeah, so what about you?
Yeah, so when I first started here at CKO, because this was one of my first jobs, I worked before, but it was like at the reg and different areas like that where you just did a lot of collateral. Didn't really deal with clients per se. I noticed that it was very hard to kind of try to understand where I was placed into design, like what was my overall placement, like where was I, like what was I supposed to do as a designer? Like, was I supposed to do collateral, which was, I mean, I can do that all day, right? Because it's just design, graphic design. But beyond that, it's like, what is my role? And I found out that I needed to learn, like, how do you manage a branding project? What is a branding project?
Right.
What is a whole strategy about it? And it's like, okay, I know how to do the end result,
right?
But how do I get there from the moment that I'm giving kind of this project to there? And how do I go about it, kind of checking off each mark and saying, okay, we're going on to the next step. Like, what does that process even look like? Like, yeah, I know how to do concept and do research and do the logo and the branding and do all essentially the brand guidelines. Like, I know how to get there, but how do I achieve the goals that the other person needs me to achieve?
And also kind of like explain it to them.
Right. And also, how do I explain these things and how do I put it into a structure that makes sense? And that's when we kind of figured out that, okay, we need time to do this. And also, it's like, how much does all that cost? Right.
Ongoing debate
here
at the office.
So it's like, I know how to get here, but how to do it and how much to charge. Like, we had to figure that out because no one was going to tell us how. We have books and they say charge 50, 60,000.
Right.
But I'm a designer that just got out of college. How do I say to a client, oh, I'm going to charge you 50,000?
Right, for sure. Like how do you convince them?
Right. And that's another thing. How do you convince somebody to give you money for what you're going to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they didn't teach you that in school.
Not at all. I think that was like the immediate, like pretty much everything you just said, but it was like the immediate thing for me was like, I need to be, my like interpersonal skills have to be like way better. That's another thing. Yeah. Like sitting down into meetings and like actually talking to people and like explaining what we do and like doing it articulately and but also concise enough that like they could understand it. Essentially like making them feel comfortable that we know what we're doing. I think that's like what's kind of struck me like immediately is like what I need to kind of get a grasp of first, or not even first, but just like over time, like I need to get better at this because that was like the immediate kind of almost like problem that was like where my skill isn't there.
Right.
Yeah, like, kind of like you is like I could design all day. I could think of a logo and start working on it and start drawing stuff up and pick colors, but it's the extra stuff. Like you have to do this for someone, so you have to go through that process. What is that process like? What's the conversation even look like? What does initial meeting look like? What questions do you ask? Because like there's all this stuff that was like never explains to us or like never even like brought up is like this is what you're going to deal with once you're out of here.
Right. It was just like present your concept and talk about it. And then we give you credit, go back, fix it, come back, and you're done.
Yeah. I feel like we're able to talk about our work really well.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. Once you have a concept, kind of talk about it and put it together. But that's only like 20% of the finalized stuff. Like how do you do the other 80% of the work?
Right. I think something as like a takeaway that I kind of wish like as a student I would have known, or even like what questions to even ask was like what are my expectations as a graphic designer? Like what are the client's expectations? How does like a relatively like basic process look like for an agency? Obviously in-house there is going to be different questions, but like for here at an agency, like what we're kind of given the responsibility of is like what's the process from A to B, or like what does the initial meetings look like? What kind of conversations do we need to have? What eventually we learned what strategy was. Strategy essentially was just concept, but the wording was just different. And I mean, there's a lot more emphasis in certain areas when it comes to strategy that we now know that
it's not just about concept. It's about, tackling pain points and helping the client achieve their goals and
like who the audience is. And like, there's all these different things that we kind of just glazed over in our education that were like, we then had to kind of confront and kind of like, really kind of like hone our skills on and kind of understand, which, I think kind of something I wanted to ask you. I was like, what do y'all wish you would have known, like exiting your education, or like what questions did you wish you even knew to ask as exiting your education? Like once
I asked a couple of things. I remember those questions. I was like, how much should I be making when I get out? And it's like, for how long should I be in this job? And I was like, well, I had to ask somebody.
Yeah, but I mean, like even those are like pretty basic
they were
questions.
Like, I'm not sure. I was like, well, me neither.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, I remember that because it was like the last, like the class that we essentially had, and they had like a sit down with us and like, what are your thoughts about the program or whatever? Like, do y'all have any questions for us now that this is your last day of college education? And I mean, it was pretty much like us just sitting down. It's like, again, it's like, we don't know what we don't even know. So it's like, I don't even know what questions to even ask you. So it was like the super surface. I was like, how much should I try and aim for in terms of my salary? And they're like, oh, like just take however many hours or how much like dollar value you want to apply to like your hour, and then times that by 40 and then figure out your salary. And then there's like maybe like around like 40,000 is what you should kind of be aiming for. It's like, okay, yeah, thanks for that. But then there's like a lot more deeper questions that we wish we would have known, whereas like, how do you pitch this, like what are the practical things that I need to know about selling what I do to a person if it is like an agency situation?
Yeah, I've learned more through YouTube and social media about that stuff than I ever did in college.
100%.
But I've never, unless it's like a tutorial to do something specific, I've never gone and looked for design education through YouTube
true.
or Skillshare or anything.
Like composition, typography.
I haven't spent a single minute on that.
Same.
It's like and if I see a course online, I'm like, nope, skip it.
Yeah.
I already know that stuff.
Yeah. We are grilled enough with that. No need. But if
it's business, how to charge for a logo, I'll sit and watch that thing for like 2 hours and replay it.
Like, how do you increase your rates over time? Or like, how do you like double, triple, quadruple your money or whatever? It's like, okay, this is something I don't know when it comes to design. What is this? And like, there are a lot of great resources out there for sure. And I'm glad those exist. And again, YouTube fucking saving the day on that, because it's like that. There are certain things that we have watched that kind of like helped shortcut us, or at least like guided us in some kind of way, because the school system that we kind of went through, not to their like not kind of blaming them or whatever, but like there are definitely things that we kind of did have to kind of catch up to speed with. And there are YouTube channels out there that kind of helped us get up to speed in what we needed to know. Because otherwise it would just be shooting in the dark for probably a lot longer, honestly.
That's another question. It's like, why doesn't the design community emphasize that aspect as well? Like, it's just been recently in the past couple of years that there's been like the only time that the AIGA has done like one of those pricing, making money off of graphic design. It's like, that's like the first time I hear about it. In the AIGA conference, like none of that. I don't remember seeing any of that for the first two that the only two that I've gone. Like, where's all that knowledge as well? And
it was a sold out kind of turnout as well for that, like that event where it was like how to charge for what you do or whatever the naming of the event was. Like, it was very much like money oriented, which is like just the turnout alone was like a really good indicator of like, no one's really talking about this. There's obviously a lot of people here like that are in the same boat, like of you graduate or even you're still like in school or you're freelance or whatever, that like there's this like level of knowledge that just isn't available, isn't shared, isn't talked about at all.
It's known, but it's not shared. I don't know, for whatever reason, even our professors don't really share that, like, because they are also designers. They have their own studios. Like, where was that knowledge of like, oh, we just did a project and we charged this much and this is what we did for them? And like, even if they just shared one concept, one kind of, not concept, but one
like bit of information.
Yeah, one bit of information of like what they went through a project. I mean, that would have been great. Even during AIGA and what they did, and even through the AIGA community, like nobody shares that stuff.
Right.
It wasn't until I found like the future online. I found them during Block, like my last year of Block. I was like, what is this? It's like,
the business of design. What does that mean?
Yeah, and it was like Chris Doe and the other guy, Jose Caballero, like talking about business of design. And I was like, these guys look like they know what they're doing. But it was the only channel that was doing that.
Yeah. So big shout out to them for sure. Like, if anyone's listening to this, like, and you have similar questions, like, definitely go check out the Future. It's just spelled out as like THE and then Future without the E at the end.
Right. And it was like
invaluable for sure.
Where are all the other channels and all the other designers that need to talk about money and how much they should be charging and
what, just like on a local level,
right? On a local level, like, why do I have to look at a channel from California? Why can't I just go and find out here?
Yeah,
talk to my
So definitely, like, if anything, when it comes to local groups, the biggest one obviously within the design community is AIGA. They're like a national organization that's like primarily geared around the graphic design community, and they throw events all around the US pretty much, and each like city has like their own chapter. But something that is definitely lacking, at least here in Houston, I don't know how it is in other places, but there is like this lack of information when it comes to the business side of design that I wish like they would kind of tackle more.
And it's getting better.
Yeah, it is. Like we said, it took a while.
Yeah. Because there's only one, like there needs to be more.
There definitely needs to be a lot more. And it's like almost, I want less. It's cool to have like bring down like a famous designer and we just have like a jerk off session of like how great they are. Like, it's cool. You could fangirl out about them, but it's like, you walk out of those things inspired, but you immediately have to face reality again. It's like
how do I even?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're a type designer, you have your business established, but how how did you get there? Like, how much do you charge for a type boundary? Like,
yeah, tell me that side of the business. I get it. You made an incredible project. I agree.
The thing
it
with
looks beautiful.
also
but
AIGA, a lot of the projects were like, they had funding. It's like things for nonprofit and how to change the world and all that stuff. Were just like, I feel like that's the next level beyond making money. It's like, how do you change the world through design? That was kind of what the AIGA conference was about. But we were students. We're like,
we're not even that close to there yet.
I could barely buy a sandwich after this conference. Like,
it's like y'all literally charged me almost like $1,000 and $500 to be here.
Yeah, but
talking about changing the world, it's like, whoa, I need to fucking make myself a sandwich first.
There is definitely a lack of information for that audience, the audience before entering college and the audience first 2 years during college. I mean, after college, like those, let's say 4 years, there's definitely a lack of information for that audience.
Yeah, I think like whenever they did have that business design event or like kind of talk here in Houston that was put on by AIGA, like you saw every kind of age group there. Like there was like juniors or like people about to go up into like block at U of H. But then there's also like older people there that look like they're freelancers. They've been in the industry for a while. And even them, like they're still like trying to get up on this kind of knowledge. And it was interesting seeing that this wasn't just like a 25, 27, 30-year-old problem. It was everyone's. Everyone's has like the same kind of questions on how to kind of like move forward professionally, how to like make this a living thing, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
No, so it's definitely like a criticism on what AIGA I think kind of needs to focus on. Or AIGA, the local level of it, the chapters, and then also just
designers
education.
Overall.
Yeah, designers overall, true.
Yeah, because not everybody's part of AIGA. But definitely there's like social media. Now you can just share through social media, blogs, YouTube, like, but people don't really share that because I mean, yeah, they're busy running their business, but also be able to be open to young designers coming and asking. Yeah, there's different rates. Like we even know different rates within here in Houston. Like we're at a different rate than, let's say, Principal or 5+8 or Primal Gray or all these other studios. We all have different rates, and they're all based on experience, like the team, the size of the team. Like everybody has their own kind of price, and just because you share that doesn't mean we're gonna price match and be like, oh, okay, we're gonna do that. And then it's like we can't even tackle that type of project, so why would we even match that? It's like,
right, true.
Like, why would we even do something for like Nike when they're like, oh, we need this huge campaign? It's like, oh, there's only 4 of us. Like,
yeah, we're not the team for that, for
right.
sure.
So I just think
that's kind of a question for us too, is like, as we do more of these either podcasts or like video content, is like maybe kind of putting like knowledge out there. Like, this is what we do. Right. This is our process. This is what our presentations look like. This is what our stylescapes look like. This is the reasoning behind all these kind of things, to kind of like maybe just help someone in our situation kind of be like, oh, okay, they put me on to something. So
yeah, maybe it could be like a mini series as well, like a Q&A. We do like a live stream or something like that, where we just announce it to designers. Hey, we're going to be doing a live stream, ask us anything about the first, before college or after college experience.
Or even like for this, like if y'all are listening to this on any of the platforms and there's like a comment section, like feel free to drop in comments or questions that y'all may have on with regards to like the business of design or like even graphic design in general, that we're totally up to answering any of these. Cause yeah, like we do want to kind of preach what we're talking about when it comes to being the change of like putting out more information when it comes to these very scarcely talked subjects within design community, So yeah, definitely kind of reach out if you'll have any questions. That's pretty much all the questions that I have. I don't know if y'all want to talk about anything else.
No.
Okay.
No, we pretty much covered a lot of them.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, you could kind of like edit this bit out, like this kind of like awkward little transition. But yeah, thank you all very much for kind of tuning in. Definitely check us out on YouTube, Spotify.
I never
iTunes.
edit anything out. I just
You don't?
cut it.
Oh my
and
god!
post it.
Nice.
Whatever. Fuck it. You're gonna hear all the awkward
This
silences.
is the content they're wishing for. They're waiting
God
for
damn
it.
All right.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Just find us on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube for now.
Okay.
And Anchor.fm is where we host it, but you don't have to go on there.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. We try and do these bi-weekly, so just keep up with us on social media. We'll be continuously putting these out into the future. And yeah, thank you all very much for tuning in.
Yeah. Smash that subscribe button if you see us on YouTube. Hit the notification bell.
Please.
That's it.
Yes.
Like,
Dunskies.
comment, subscribe.
Yeah.
Like,
Like, comment, subscribe. If you like our content, please comment below.
Mhm.
If you have any topics that you want us to talk about, comment below and all that jazz. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good job, Jimmy.
Thanks.
You fucking did it.
I tried.